right, so welcome back. So the first thing that we're going to choose to implement is printing our game. Now, to be honest, this is mainly because we did it in Swift, and I want to kind of show you how you can print the game. And we're also going to kind of stub it out to where you can run it without just crashing the app, right? So we're going to go back into our tic-tac-toe game. Ultimately, what we're trying to add this time is a description method so that we can print this thing and just kind of get ready for the actual game logic. So to start our implementation, what we're going to do is we're going to create our constructor, our init method. We're also going to kind of stub into these three public methods a little bit of code just so the thing doesn't crash and burn. So let's go ahead and go into our tic-tac-toe game.h. What I like to do is I like to just copy my header prototypes into my implementation file and then just change the semicolon to an opening and closing curly brace. You can see that there's various errors here because they claim to return things which they don't return anything yet, but we're going to go through and fix that. Actually, we could kind of stub out something just to get rid of the errors really quick, right? So if you just wanted to get rid of the errors, you could return a game string of hello. You could return a mark type of mark type X, and then press square isn't yelling at us, so we'll get to that one later, right? All right, the other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to make our constructor, so we need to have an init method. We've already got an init method from our NS object superclass. We just need to override it. And the syntax, it's got like this boilerplate thing, which I don't love, and it's fine, I'll do it. But it's that you create self from superinit, and then you make sure that it worked, and then you actually do your stuff inside the if statement, and then you return self at the end. And it's fine. I don't know, it feels unnecessary. So the first thing we want to do is we want to set our property for game state to be game state xturn. So that's the default there. The other thing we'd like to do is we'd like to go through our game board and set everybody to the mark type of none. There's a couple ways you could do this. I'm just going to use an old school for loop and then just increment I as I go through. And I'm just going to say game board at location I is equal to a mark type of none. So that's just a really simple, that's just C stuff, right? Clearing out an array and setting the default value. This may have gotten for free because this has a value of 0, but I certainly want to do it explicitly, right? All right, so that's kind of creation of my game, and I've stubbed out a very simple things in these places, and we could actually run it now, which would be kind of fun. And you can see that, in fact, it does say hello at the top, and it prints an X everywhere, which I think is kind of neat, right? So it's working without syntax errors. And if you click these things, not much happens. But I mean, if you wanted to, it is passing through the press square, so you could put logs in here. So you could just say press %d, and then you could just print out the index like that. Since it's an NS integer, it might yell at me on my log, so I'm just going to cast it to an int. I mean, its value is 0 through 9, so it doesn't matter if it's an int or not. So you can see that these are getting called, right? So it's wanting me to actually do something with these things, which is cool. It's just that we're not doing much yet. All right, so let's go through and implement these things a little bit better. I'm going to start off with the things that involve like printing related things. And so one of those is the game string, because that was something that we printed as well. So instead of just saying return, what we of course would rather do is we want to make a switch statement, and we want to use our self.gameState. And we're just going to go through each one, and we're going to return. So instead of break, I'm just going to say return a string. There are a bunch of ways to do this, but this is a simple way that I've chosen to do it, right? So I think you've kind of got the idea of what's going on here. You're going to just have a case, and then you're going to have a return value. You don't need to watch me type the whole thing, so I'll just do it real quick. And hopefully as you were going through here, it did a really nice job with the code completion as you were typing these things. So I'm down to my last one here, which I think will just say tie game. If you want to look at the exact string we used, I mean, you can compare it to like our Swift playground. So X's turn, O's turn, X wins, O wins, and tie game look pretty good to me. So what we're going to do here is we're actually just going to kill this return of hello, and it should always return the correct game state. So you can see that this method we had to create just because we didn't have the fancy raw values thing. So we made a method, and to be honest, it was pretty simple. If you did run it now, it should say X's turn at the top, and it won't ever change from X's turn because we haven't implemented that yet. So there's that one. So that one's in pretty good shape. Next up, I mean, you could implement a lot of things. So, I mean, you could implement press square next, but the order that we did it over in Swift is we actually did all the printing things first. So we're going to deal with printing first. In order to do printing, you need to override description. And then the way description works, if you kind of look at the playground here, so there's a description over here as well. We printed out the game state, and then we said the word board, and then we printed out the board with this hyphens, X's, and O's. And we're going to do the same thing again. So we're going to say return NS string, string with format. And the format is going to be such that we print out the game state, and then we're going to say the word board, and then we're going to print out the board as a string. So I'm just going to say %at board colon %at, and then the way that we're going to fill these things in is by calling methods that we kind of still need to write, right? I guess we've still got get game state string, so that one's done. But then we're also going to need a method for get game board string, and that method does not yet exist. We're going to have to go write it. So let's just go ahead and write a get game board string. Now before we wrote a method like this that was sneaky, right? So if you come over here and look at it, we called it get game string, and it took in an optional array. I don't love that name now that I look back on it. And it took in an optional parameter for indices, and it was all fancy, and it worked for both printing and it worked inside the check game. Instead of making a fancy function that does both, we're just going to make two independent functions. It'll just be easier. So we're just going to write one that works for printing everything now, and we'll worry about the check game later, right? So I'm just going to call it get game board string. And what I wanted to do is I just wanted to go through and build up a string that represents those mark types. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an NS mutable string because I want a string that I can kind of like modify and build up. I'm going to call it game board string, seems like as good a name as any, and it's going to be an NS mutable string alloc, and then I'm just going to do an init so that I get an empty string to start with. So that's what I'm planning to do to make this thing. And then I'm going to make a for loop that's just like I did before. I'm going to start it off with I is equal to 0. I'm going to go through the entire array, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say game board string, append string, and I'm going to append a string to it. So the string that I'm going to append is like an X, or it's an O, or it's a hyphen. So I need some way to get an X, an O, or a hyphen. So I'm actually just going to make another method, keep digging my rabbit hole a little smaller. And so I'm going to need a method for get mark type string. I'll just pass the actual mark type to it. So I'll say game board bracket I. This one's got complex in a hurry. So I'm saying game board string, append a string, and then what I'm doing is I'm calling a function. I'm making a function called getMarkType. Maybe I should just go prototype this real quick. Note that these are not public methods, so I'm just putting them in the .m file. A lot of people use naming conventions where it starts with an underscore. If you want to do that, I mean, I think that's great. It adds code clarity. The only reason I'm not doing it is just because I didn't do it in the notes. But to be honest, I kind of wish that I had. So you could add an underscore to show that this is an internal only parameter. What getMarkType string was receiving is it was receiving a mark type, right? So it's actually receiving a mark type there. What the heck, I'll say mark type as the parameter there. And it's going to return a string from it. So we've still got to go write that. let's finish this other method in our rabbit hole. And all we need to do at the end here is we need to say return the game board string. So I know that it's coming at you fast, but it's a video. You can pause it, you can rewatch. You can also just look at the code because I think it's way easier to understand once you see the finished product, right? So we're making a game board string, we're appending a mark to it, and then we're returning it. So what we need to write here in our little rabbit hole is we need to still write get mark type string. So it's actually pretty similar to our function before, right? So we have an enum value, and we're just wanting to return a string from it. So we're just going to use a switch on the mark type. And so it's going to have the mark type of none, which what we want to do there is we just want to return a hyphen. And so in Objective or Swift, we were able to do these things a little bit easier because of the whole like raw value of a string. But it's not hard here. It's just a little bit more tedious, right? And so you can see that we're just returning a single character string for each of these options. And so there we are printing out the mark types. We're printing out the game board string. And then we're printing out a tic-tac-toe game. So what I want to do is I just want to see if we can print it. So go into your view controller. If you're using mine, there should already be a print line in there. If you're using your own, you'll have to add it. Oh, I think I removed it just to kind of make sure that you would add it in case you didn't. And we want to print out the game instead of just updating the view. So there should be 3 places where you update view. So there's 1, there's 2, and then here's the one I actually care about, 3. Make sure that there's a printing in those locations. Like I say, if you started with the code that I gave you, it's already there. But if you start with your own code, it might not be. And voila, X is turn, and the board is equal to all hyphens. Notice that there are X's here, but that's because we lied to that function. But the all hyphens is the real, actual, like game board values. All right, so printing, check. And we actually got a lot done kind of along the way of printing. But we wanted to print just to be consistent with some of the things that we did in Swift in that playground. And now we've got it done. All right, so we can print the game state. We can return mark types. We're just not doing it correctly yet. That's going to be really easy to implement. The big one is that we have not yet implemented press square or check for win, but we've got most of these other things ready to go, including our description. All right, come back next time, and we'll take care of the actual logic to let you press a square and play this game.